All righty, we are live. Welcome everyone, and thank you for joining today's webinar, Adopting the Right Journey in Healthcare Contingent Labor. I am Laura Moritz. I am the Director of Implementation for Flentis, and I'm going to be moderating today's conversation. And I'm joined by our Head of Sales, Eric Koppin, and our guest, CEO and founder of L.I.O.N, Flentis Larson. So thank you guys for being here with me. So
Thank you.
today, we're going to just have a conversation about contingent workforce within the healthcare space. We're going to do a couple of reviews of some case studies, and then we're going to do a live Q&A at the end. So if you guys want to submit questions throughout, we'll revisit those at the end of the discussion here. I want to kick it off by kind of giving Eric and Francis each some time to just talk about Flentis and L.I.O.N. So Eric, I'll start with you if you want to just kind of give an overview of what Flentis is.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Laura. Flentis is kind of the next generation VMS platform out there that, really kind of taking a different approach to contingent workforce management. I think what makes us a little bit different is that, we've built this platform to be flexible across multiple industries. We actually got our start in healthcare, and as you know, healthcare is a very challenging environment to manage in terms of requisitioning, on-demand talent requirements, per diem, nursing needs, credentialing, licensure management, all that stuff. So getting your start there obviously translates really well to other industries, especially in industrial and call center. So what we've done is essentially created a platform that can be used across many different industries, that is open API, that plugs and plays very well into a number of different organizations, that supports float pool, that supports talent pooling, and that it also brings essentially a huge ecosystem of value-added suppliers and solutions to the client landscape and ecosystem. So we're really excited about what we've accomplished so far. We're growing at a very nice clip, but I think we're taking a very different perspective in contingent workforce solutioning, and especially in healthcare and a lot of the challenges that lie around it. So we're happy to have this discussion. Francis, I'll pass it to you.
Great. Well, thanks, Eric, and thanks, Laura. Happy to be here talking. I'm Francis Larson, CEO and founder of L.I.O.N. We're an employer of record for the contingent workforce. We work with all sorts of talent platforms, whether that's a VMS or a labor marketplace or MSP or even a staffing supplier. We're an employer of record that's really focused on high volume contingent labor. Over 70% of our business is in healthcare. And so we've had a lot of experience dealing with all ranges of roles in healthcare and the needs of platforms that are distinct from smaller companies. And we've really focused on getting to scale with an all-in-one white label platform, an open API similar to Flentis. And we really focused on integrations and deep partnerships. And so we're super excited to be here and talk about healthcare today.
Wonderful. Thank you both for that. And Eric, you kind of touched on this a bit in your intro, but I want to kick off the conversation just to give our audience an understanding of why we chose healthcare specifically. And I know you're very passionate about the healthcare space. So if you want to just give a quick little intro of why we wanted to talk about healthcare today.
Absolutely. And you're right. I am quite passionate about it. Having many years ago in my career started, not started, but early in my career, selling MSP services for a number of years within healthcare. So it's funny, is like as we've come back to healthcare in my career, not a lot has changed, which is actually a little sad and surprising, which is just furthered my interest and passion about providing solutioning in this space. But by and large, healthcare is one of the fastest growing segments in the staffing industry, if not the fastest. And certainly with all the challenges that the pandemic has brought about, it certainly has provided kind of a microscope over this segment of our industry. And we've needed to kind of, I think, take a step back and say, okay, what are we doing? And is it the right thing? Is it the right thing for the clients? Is it really become more of a vendor advocacy versus a client advocacy? And are we translating some of these amazing solutions that we have in the Fortune 500 into the healthcare industry? I would argue by no means are we doing that. And there's a tremendous amount of room for growth and change and improvement in this space. I think just the unbelievable talent supply strain, has I think highlighted some of the opportunities for change. I think there's a lot of divided programs out there looking at clinical and non-clinical and how we're managing that spend. I would say that cost is absolutely out of control. And how can we do things to rein that in, right? Look at different methodologies of cost control and cost avoidance. Visibility, the number of clients that we're talking to on a weekly basis. What's your data look like? Oh, I don't know. Well, how do you get your data? I ask my vendor. So you're asking your vendor for your data. Does that seem a little bit, fox in the hen house like, you should be able to have access to your vendor or data at any given point, right? So visibility is a big, just a big issue as well. And then finally, when you look at talent supply, what are we doing besides having these single relationships with certain vendors? What are they bringing to the table besides their own talent pool? Are they utilizing other services? Are they vendor inclusive, or are they really vendor reclusive, right? So there's a lot of opportunities to talk about this. There's a lot of opportunity for improvement, for change, for growth. I love this webinar because I think with what Francis is seeing and what I've seen in this marketplace, there's just a tremendous amount of opportunity. So, Francis, I'll pass the baton to you.
Yeah, I think, why healthcare? So I was at SIA or Houston last week, and they were talking, some of these MSPs and talent platforms we're talking about just the renewed focus on spend in healthcare. The amount of spend going to contingent labor in healthcare over the last year or so has gone up 500%. So it's now become a CFO problem. It used to be that 2 to 4% of spend for a healthcare system was contingent labor. Now that's 10%. So contingent labor went from a 2% spend thing to a 10% spend thing. So it's a high level focus issue. It's now a C-suite issue for healthcare systems to be focused on contingent labor. So what are ways to ease this strain of this increased spend, how to lower costs, how to get the right supply. And there's a lot of ways to do that. I think we agree with Flentis that technology is one way to do that. So it's a huge increase in spend, and everybody's feeling the strain on how do you find the right talent for healthcare. And they have so many options. It's really bid up the price quite a bit.
So you both touched on a lot of the things that I have more detailed questions on about later on. So we're really going to dig into some of those topics too. So spend, visibility, and the first place that I want to start, and Francis, this question is for you first, and then Eric, of course, add on anything that you feel necessary. But we've seen some struggles in the past with supply side and sourcing qualified candidates in healthcare, and just keeping that flow of candidates steady. So can you kind of explain how some of those struggles can be addressed?
The way that we see this in the market is the struggle comes from turnover. So people that might already have worked for the system, for the facility, and they're no longer working for them. So whether they've retired, whether they've left the workforce, whether they've just decided to work for somewhere else, from our standpoint, it's all about churn. So like, how do you lower the churn? How do you make an experience that's so good for the talent that they want to stay working with you and working within your ecosystem? So we think there's a lot of ways to do that. Number one, I think Eric would agree on this, it's like technology. So technological solutions, meeting the candidates where they are. It's not 30 years ago where you could do things by paper anymore. That's done. Like, it has to be easier than that. Multiple duplicative entry of systems. Like, they have to enter in 4 different systems to enter time, getting approval, getting paid, delayed approvals. All those things add friction to where people these candidates, they don't want to work in these facilities any longer, and they want to go somewhere else, and they'll go to another vendor who has a better deal or maybe a better price. And a lot of times I think that shows up in the increased pay rates. So, and increased bill rates on top of that. So we believe firmly that it really starts with a lot of turnover, and there's a lot of ways to address that. Float pools, there's direct sourcing, there's just expanding the supplier base, working with more suppliers. Like, how can you have people that are keeping the people that you work with before in your system to continue working? And we believe that that's one of the primary drivers of it. And then another thing is just expanding supply base. Like, where can you go to find candidates? And sometimes it's going to be non-traditional, it'll be newer suppliers that maybe you haven't worked with before, giving them a chance. And we say that all the time. We see smaller suppliers getting in the door with large systems because these healthcare systems are out of options, and so they'll take a chance. And so that's what we see is, like, if you can keep people in the door, you're not going to have to raise the rates and then increasing your supply by going probably non-traditional methods.
Mm-hmm. Agreed. Did you want me to jump in?
Yeah, I was just going to ask if you had anything to add.
Yeah. So for me, what I see is a couple things. Certainly retention is huge. It's for everybody, but when you let someone out the door, you're taking that intellectual capital. They're taking that intellectual capital with them, and that culture knowledge, right? And the training and the time it takes to orient these folks and get them up to running, be part of your organization, your culture. You want them back, right? And you want that visibility into also when their contract's ending, so you can potentially move them around to other departments, other floors, or other facilities, right? That's a big opportunity. One thing I do see is a glaring barrier is vendor inclusivity in a lot of these programs. A lot of MSPs really are not truly MSPs in the sense that they're completely focused on, client advocacy. I mean, certainly they're always working for the client and trying to do best by their clients. But I think what we need more in healthcare is this more vendor agnostic, vendor inclusive approach to program management. And what do I mean by that? I mean, your MSP maybe not having a staffing interest in your client, especially for the larger clients. I can tell you right now, one of the glaring things that we all see and never talk about in healthcare is the fact that a lot of these larger providers, when they do have that book of business that they're managing, their competitors won't play, and that's a problem. So I think it's about time we start having a discussion about, what kind of neutral organizations and I guess vendor agnostic program management service wrappers are there out there to kind of, calm those waters down where other organizations can play and not feel threatened. That's a big issue. The other issue is that I see glaringly is the lack of utilization of direct sourcing. Direct sourcing, again, has been in the industry, staffing industry for a while now, and it's growing. And you're utilizing machine learning technology to, reach out to candidates using your brand and creating this talent pool, and you're continuously engaging with candidates and talking to them about who they know and creating referral programs and working with a client and bringing in, alumni and interns and referrals. If you can build your own talent pool through this vendor agnostic PMO, there's a ton of opportunity for much better talent supply, but also cost savings. And we'll get to that a little bit later in the discussion. But, you need to have a great contingent talent pool. And doing so, you've got to do some different things. You can't just rely on one vendor, especially for large organizations. Maybe for small to mid, you can get away with that, but that's one thing. I think another thing is you need to have a little more of a holistic approach to clinical and non-clinical. I think oftentimes non-clinical doesn't get the same care and attention in a lot of organizations because that's just not the specialty of the supplier that's managing the program. I think you also need to have a good understanding of those niche suppliers, as Francis alluded to. There's a lot of great, providers I know that are, hey, all we do is nurse anesthetists, or all we do is therapists, right? Who are those folks, and how can we get them into our contingent ecosystem and not feel threatened? Your MSP not feeling like they're going to, move their cheese. Well, again, maybe a more neutral program is something that you should be looking at. And then finally, independent contractors and talent marketplaces like Upwork and Freelancer. What are we doing around ICs? There's a lot of ICs and locum tenens, nurse anesthetists, et cetera, et cetera. How are we gaining access to those folks, right? And then how are we vetting them to make sure that we're compliant? And then what are we paying for them, And again, there's another huge opportunity for cost savings that we'll talk about a little bit later. So it's across the entire talent supply chain. There's just way more out there than I think a lot of clients are getting access to. And it's self-defeating. It's kind of sad. But I think, as we have more of these conversations, I think people are now, in that C-level suite or senior leadership suite around talent acquisition. I think folks are really starting to see, okay, hey, there are better mousetraps out there, and we need to kind of open up our eyes and widen our horizons. So that's all I had to add.
No, and that's perfect. You mentioned cost savings a couple of times there, and that's actually my next question for you. So you mentioned a few different factors in the cost savings, direct sourcing being one of those. Can you kind of talk about what are some of those other strategies that can be leveraged by these healthcare systems?
Okay, well, there's a lot, and I'll go through all of them, actually, at least the ones that I see right away. So buckle in. So direct sourcing, direct sourcing is, the next thing in contingent workforce, has been for a while. I hardly see it at all in healthcare. In fact, I don't know of really any big direct sourcing programs that are notable. You're starting to see them trickle in and variations of them, but employing technology like a work llama, right, with a curation service and an EOR platform like L.I.O.N. I don't see that as much, but we're starting to get companies that are in healthcare systems that are getting it and now really interested in piloting it and having it a part of their programs. What direct sourcing does is essentially it utilizes your healthcare services brand, right, and you're like plugging in a technology into your VMS platform that is continuously going out and doing robotic sourcing into multiple talent marketplaces, like LinkedIn and Career Builder. Just whatever you can think of, and it's just constantly bringing in talent. So then you have a curation service that sits behind it, and they're essentially recruitment, right? It's very contingent RPO like, if you will. So what they're doing is they're curating the talent. They're looking at folks, making sure that the technology is stack ranking them right, and then they're adding extra vetting layers and submitting them to the client. All in that, by and large, it's a combination of machine learning sourcing and the curation team that is actually out there pointing the technology in the right direction. So they're not just looking at resumes. These folks are an integral part from the strategic level and managing that technology. I don't want to get down the road too far in direct sourcing, but all in all, you're talking about sometimes 20, 30, 40 point reductions in markups utilizing direct sourcing. IC management, you're talking about independent contractors, your PRNs, NPs, PAs, nurse anesthetists, locum tenens. A lot of these folks are independent contractors, but are they really ICs? They got to go through a vetting process, and who's going to hold the defense file, and what does that look like, right? What's the indemnification? And then, since it's really a corp to corp relationship, what's the markup on that? Are you getting marked up a general staffing markup, or are you getting marked up correctly just as a kind of an administrative management fee, right? And we're seeing huge cost differentiation in that. EOR is exactly what Ascend does. You guys have your candidates that you want to bring back, or you have alumni or retirees that you want to bring back. You shouldn't be paying full staffing prices. It should be a low markup, generally, south of 35% based on the needs, could be in the 20s. You're talking about significant reduction there. Are you employing tenure discounts into your program? Are you tiering your supply base? Are you getting volume rebates? I know all these things are terrifying, but it's time to kind of bring that markup down a little bit back to where it used to be, because it's kind of gotten out of control, right? So, are you using supply and rate intelligence, right? There's an organization that we utilize, MC Lightcast, for example, that we plug into our VMS that allows clients to see if they can do remote hiring, for example, for IT, hire someone in St. Louis versus San Francisco to do that role. I mean, think about the bill rate change for that. So there's a lot of different things. And then, of course, we've seen some companies go to an internal contingent recruitment program where they have their own contingents, recruiters, and as a part of the program, not as the only part. But just there's so many avenues to mitigate cost. And unfortunately, they're not talked about, but they're real, and they've been doing it for years in the general industry as a whole. So you want to think strategic and cost savings. I mean, we can go all day on how to save organizations.
We'll do a webinar about that specifically.
Yeah. But that's what we see.
Yeah,
Go
no,
ahead.
I was going to say,
definitely
Francis,
add
you
to
kind of mentioned EOR, but do you have anything to add to that?
I mean, unrelated to EOR, just like I think it's what brings down costs is technology. That's what brings down the cost. Whether it's like a VMS, like having multiple suppliers that are competitive against each other, or having a direct sourcing platform that instead of a recruiter sending an email out to 50 candidates, hey, can you do a shift? It's the system sending out a notification, one-click acceptance instead of an email. Like technology is like these platforms, they're competing with email. That's what's really happening. It's like before it was like a person, these suppliers and these other platforms maybe were doing just email. People emailing people like, hey, can you do a shift? But increasingly now it's notifications, one click, simple. So you have this pool of people, you have all these resumes, but now it's in a platform. Now you can do notifications. Now there's one click, two click type interaction. You don't need these expensive recruiters like doing manual stuff that makes the markups need to be super high to pay for that. If you have the technology, you don't need to pay for those crazy markups, and it brings the cost down. So firms that are enabling technology, you look at these platforms, and not all of them are called direct sourcing. Some are like direct sourcing, but they're kind of like variants of that, where you might think of them as a talent marketplace, but they're effectively just a pool of people who are ready to work in your locality. And when a shift becomes available or a job becomes available, they get notified, they can accept this shift. There's no email exchanges. There's curators who are doing a little bit of hand-holding and relationship management, but it's not the grunt work is not being done by people, it's being done by technology. And so we see those platforms implementing this, whether it's direct sourcing, a talent platform, or even like high technology focused VMSs, they have all of these people. And so they can, instead of having huge markups, they can have a much smaller markup, utilize an EOR player, and you're talking about 30, 40% markups instead of 80% markups. So that's where we see the savings is if you can use a technology player, the markups go way, way, way down because everyone's focused on what they're good at, technology players. And then with somebody like us, so the suppliers don't have to be employers and also drive up the cost because they're not efficient. And so all these technology players working together just brings the cost way, way, way down.
Mm-hmm. I would agree. The only caveat I would add to that, Francis, is that having come from the direct sourcing world personally, I cannot undervalue the power and importance of the curation team.
Right.
They do need to understand the space. They do need to understand where the talent marketplace is. They do need to understand, the roles and the type of candidate engagement that is required. Because again, these are the folks that are sitting behind the technology. They're pointing it. They're doing the candidate marketing. They're doing the campaigns. And it's more than just the vetting, right? So I've seen personally direct sourcing programs get a little stale because the curation organization, isn't really truly strong at candidate, marketing and candidate engagement. But it's nice when you do have a great curation team behind the tech. They understand your business and you've got your brand out there. So people are looking, saying, oh, this job is with, Siemens. Oh, this job is with KP. Oh my God, I can be a part of their talent pool. That's really cool. There's a lot of power behind that brand. And it's much better than just saying, oh, hey, I have a client that might be interested. Well, okay, that's great. There's a lot of clients interested in me because I'm a, pediatric nurse that has 20 years experience, right? So people organizations underestimate the power of their brand. And direct sourcing is kind of brought that to the table on the contingent side.
So I want to shift gears a little bit and talk about the differences in clinical versus non-clinical, and making sure that there are solutions built that support both of those. So Francis, I want to kind of start with you of what are some solutions that can be provided to make sure needs are met on both sides of that, and then we'll go to Eric for any additional info.
One of the big things is the requirements for onboarding are just so different for non-clinical versus clinical. It depends on what they do, but sometimes it's just a very different onboarding journey for credentialing for a non-clinical person. They're not going to have to do this necessarily the same things that maybe an RN would do. So like you have to work with suppliers or a platform like a Flentis or a L.I.O.N, where the journey of the candidate from getting the job to starting is customized to what type of role they have. And so if you're working with somebody or these companies that are doing very manual processes, it slows it down quite a bit. And they might not be able to work with both types of candidates. We do it. Most of our stuff is clinical. 70% of our business is healthcare and clinical. But we have a lot of folks where we have, in addition to clinical players or clinical talent in a hospital, you'll have janitors and dietary aides, which are much different. Environmental services, people that are not, they're not licensed in the same way that the clinical folks are. So I think that's a really big thing is folks who can work with both, who have experience doing both. If you just work with somebody who's pure healthcare, maybe they can't cover those other jobs, and you're going to be again back to square one, where you're working with multiple platforms, spreadsheets, manual effort. The point is the way to save, I believe, is centralization in one place. So you have great visibility. You can see where your costs are, and you can have everything to see it overview instead of having to rely on, you have one platform that's great. Oh, and now this other thing, we have spreadsheets, and maybe your costs are hidden in that spreadsheet and you don't see it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you hit the nail on the head, honestly. I do see, again, I said this earlier, I do see sometimes that the non-clinical stuff doesn't get the same love and attention that the clinical does with the traditional, healthcare MSPs that are out there, especially with the larger systems. And I do see them sometimes divide up under one platform. And sometimes those platforms aren't really built for healthcare either. So that's kind of, you've got a barrier on the healthcare side and a barrier on the non-clinical side. So you need a platform that can, overreach both aspects of contingent workforce. And then when you look at contingent workforce, you're also saying, again, what am I using in terms of talent supply? What does my program management office know about IT? What do they know about finance? What do they know about any corporate services or non-clinical related requirements that we have to, outsource to on a weekly basis? I think that's an area that needs to be considered. And it goes back again to your program management organization, your MSP, and your overall strategy and what you're trying to achieve. It's usually just the better, faster, cheaper model, which is important. But at the end of the day, you want something that's easy to use and has a high level of quality. Clients want data. You can't make smart decisions without having good data. And if your visibility in one aspect of your business isn't as good as the other, then that's going to provide a tremendous challenge for you in all of your decision making going forward. And where can I get more talent here, or where can I save money here? Where can I translate some of this contingent workforce to potentially direct, right? Because we also know that contingent workforce is a great feeder for organizations that want to grow their direct worker population as well. So, it's, again, I think really it's all about just having an easy to use overarching solution that has great visibility. And there's stuff that's already out there that folks can use.
So I want to talk about something that you just mentioned, and you also mentioned it earlier, which is kind of who's managing these processes. And a lot of times it is that master vendor model, right? And so, Eric, I was wondering if you can speak a little bit about how programs can diversify their supply base, and what are the benefits of doing that? I know we've touched on that kind of throughout, but if you can just focus on that specifically.
Yeah. So, I think it's worthwhile to take a look at organizations that do not really have a staffing interest as your PMO provider, right? I think I'm not saying you have to completely alleviate that from your solution opportunities, but I think there's a glaringly small amount of vendor neutral, vendor inclusive PMOs out there that really are working for completely 100% the client and not really their bottom line. I mean, we all have a bottom line, but there's a way to win-win as a staffing organization, as a real MSP provider, as any kind of provider within the ecosystem and contingent. So vendor neutrality, inclusivity is really where you start. It's all about talent supply. So if you're able to diversify your talent supply chain, you're able to add more capable vendors, niched vendors, marketplaces, direct sourcing, ICs, et cetera, it's to your benefit. That's really the start. Um, you know, are you running RFIs out there on an annual, biannual basis, based on capability, based on jurisdiction, right? Based on industry sector. That's good to know, because if you're getting really good data around your vendors, your vendor community, who's performing, who needs a little boost, who's just not giving you any attention, starts there, and then it cascades down. So, your data should always be driving your decisions and your strategy. So those are the things you should really be looking at is, okay, who's running my program management office right now, and what is their overarching strategy, and what does the next year, 2-3 years look like? What is our roadmap? It's not just, hey, can you fill a job? It's bigger than that. It's, how can we improve our talent supply? How can we, mitigate cost? How can we continue to provide 100% compliance? Et cetera, et cetera. These are all things that are very important. So, if I think one of my former bosses used to say, if you're not moving forward, you're dying, right? So, I mean, the same thing goes with contingent workforce programs. You've got to be continuously moving forward, because if you're not really providing next level service, and someone's going to come out there and take your business eventually. But then again, it's also going to hurt the client in the interim.
Yeah. And Francis, do you have anything to add to that before I go to you for our last question?
Yeah, I do. I mean, I think that given the shortage of talent, this structural, it's not just pandemic, it seems to be a structural, shortage of talent. How do you solve that? And I think diversifying your supply base, I think it means taking a chance on some firms, some either new suppliers. They might be a platform. They just raised some money. They're seed stage. They've got a cool technology. You've never heard of them other than last year. And I think it might be the time to take a look at their talent supply. And okay, they might be new. You can work with larger platforms, somebody like an EOR like Ascend, that can make sure that all the compliance stuff is being taken care of. All the credentialing, all of the onboarding, all of the background check stuff, all the things that are super important to healthcare systems. Like a firm like us can make some of those newer vendors, some of those newer suppliers, newer talent pools, make it a lot safer chance or safer choice. And I think taking a chance on these newer firms, they have a new technology, they've got a new talent supply, they have a new method of doing things, they might be cheaper. I think taking a chance is going to diversify and allow you to actually realize some real improvements in talent.
Absolutely. And so I have one more question for us, and then I want to make sure we have time to kind of review those case studies quickly and do the Q&A. But before we wrap up questions, the last one, we've kind of had throughout the conversation sprinkles of how important data is and visibility. But Francis, can you talk a little bit about what these healthcare systems can actually do with that data to help improve decision making?
Yeah, I mean, the number one thing comes down to all the data being in one place. So integration. So if you have like some stuff that's on spreadsheets, some things that are on one platform, another thing on another platform, that can become a huge barrier to understanding the business. So like, for instance, with us and Flentis, our partnership, tight integration, data speaks back and forth. So data that comes into us and goes back, there's nothing lost by working with multiple platforms because there's a tight integration. So I think that's really important. Once you have the visibility in one platform, that's the thing. You should be one platform that's a source of truth. So it'd probably be somebody like a Flentis, or maybe it's someone else. But the point is that you have one place where you look, where you see all of your data, and you can make a business decision. And in computer science, it's the source of truth. You want to have that in one place so you can make a good decision. What drives your business? That's going to be like a CFO level thing, your management looking at your business and where are you like spending money, what kind of roles are taking a long time to fill. You're never going to be able to do any advanced analytics without having all that data in one place. If you're spending all your time cleaning and gathering data, I guarantee that you're just not going to do it, and it's going to be an afterthought until it's an emergency. So having it in one place, you can get ahead of until it becomes a crisis breaking point, and it's like threatens the business fundamentally.
No, I like that it's an afterthought until it becomes an emergency. I think being in implementation, I deal with that all the time. It's like, we needed this done yesterday kind of thing. Eric, do you want to add anything onto that before we go into the case studies?
I think business intelligence, data analytics, all of that stuff is just, it's so important to a program, and having clients have direct access to that is key. At many different user levels, right? Even from a tactical program perspective, all the way up to CFO level, CHRO level. You got to know what's happening in your organization. So being able to track, what are my open requisitions, right? What is my budget for that requisition? Where are my approvals and that are recs in process, right? What are my open recs in general? All right. So, just understanding the activity that's going on. What's my head count? I need to know right now, what's my head count per facility, per department? What's my average bill rate? All of these things are extremely important. And I'm seeing constantly that it's tough for clients to get access to that. Not to mention, performance analytics on your vendors. You want to see who's performing, who's not performing, by category. So if you do need some more vendors or better vendors, you can make that determination. The data doesn't lie. So budget and planning, these are all things that you learn by capturing data around your program. So every quarter you're getting better and better and better and understanding generally what your seasonal needs are on the contingent side. And also, implementing things like rate and supply intelligence to keep you in check, keep your vendor population in check, and, help you kind of drive conversations around what are other opportunities, whether it be internal recruitment or direct sourcing. What can we do to supplement our program to make it more efficient, to drive more people, to more candidates to our organization, and make them want to stay, right? So, retention, attrition, These are all things you capture through technology. And there's nothing more alarming than attrition to any organization, which highlights I've got a gap. Is it a cultural gap? Is it a rate gap? I mean, data just doesn't lie. So I think having that as a part of your overall contingent ecosystem is just it's a must these days to keep people in the game or even ahead of the game when it comes to the war on talent.
Absolutely. And I know we could talk about each of these topics for an hour each, but I want to move on to the case studies. And before we do that, I want to remind everyone that right after the case studies, we're going to do the Q&A. So if there are any questions, please just go ahead and type those out now, and we'll revisit those right after these case studies. So we've got a couple that we're going to show here. Let's see if we can get that first one up. Ooh, that's kind of small. All right. Well, I'm going to let Eric and Francis each speak to these different case studies. We've got two to go through just really briefly.
Okay. Yeah, it is coming up really small on the screen.
I know. I'm trying to...
Yeah. So, we did see ourselves as one of our clients when we came in. That's perfect. Thank you, Laura.
Yeah.
There was just no technology at all. I mean, there was no VMS. Everything was just very email and spreadsheet driven. So it was very difficult. It's that situation where the client was constantly calling on all of their vendors for data instead of having the data at their fingertips. So again, when you're asking, any of your vendors for data, you get what you get, and it may or may not be 100% up to speed, right? Or maybe lacking. You may have problems with your invoicing and reconciliations. That happens all the time. So what we were able to do is when we went in and did our discovery, and then eventually won the business and implemented, the client now, at any moment's notice can pull up what their headcount and their spend is. Through a VMS, it consolidates your invoices by vendor, by location, has everything separated by department code, GL code, right? And then it's one single payment to us or your program office for vendor disbursement. So that's significant. Also, you need your technology to manage your credentialing and licensure. When is it lapsing? You got to get notifications. Make sure that people aren't on site that have lapsed certs or credentials. That's obviously a huge no-no, huge liability. So that's an important part of the tech, which certainly we serve. Analytics, of course, clients get forecasting as the program matures. You learn more and more about your program, about your vendors, about your market. So, you're making data-driven decisions rather than just gut feeling decisions or decisions that are encouraged by some of your vendor population. And then I think lastly was just, the overall overarching communication, between the client and the vendor community. And, there were a number of vendors that were smaller that we've seen in some of these programs that once, a VMS was implemented, they were seeing more recs. And I'm speaking specifically to PMO that was managed by the client. They weren't getting that visibility because they had limited, sales organization or limited relationships. That's one aspect of it as well. But, our job is to essentially be that system of record, right? And create a open and visible communication portal, not just for the client, but for the suppliers. One thing I love about the Flentis solution is that suppliers can easily pull reports out, and then we can integrate into their back office. So that makes things a lot easier. We want the supplier community to feel a part of the program. And I think one of the nice thing is, the Flentis platform was actually built by suppliers, and it's noticeable. So, like having one portal to multiple programs, et cetera, et cetera. So I think of VMS, certainly with organizations that are lean in talent and can't manage this administrative laden process that is contingent workforce, certainly is a must have to really take your program next level.
Awesome. Thanks, Eric. And we'll go to the next one quickly. And Francis, you can speak on this one for a few minutes.
Great. Yeah, we'll keep this short to get to the question. So one of a big example, and it's not on the screen, but we work with a large healthcare system in the South. We got brought in as a direct sourcing partner. A direct sourcing platform brought us in, and basically the system put a lot of their float people onto the platform. They also had folks that the platform sourced themselves. So it's kind of a mixed group of people in their pool. It's contingent sourced folks that were sourced by the platform, and also these internally sourced people. And when there was a match for jobs, they send it over to us. We onboard. We end up billing with integration with the platform. And what this has done is brought down markups from 60 down to 30. So instead of it ends up being hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars a year in savings, just because there's a new method of finding candidates that doesn't have to go through necessarily a traditional MSP sort of method. That's only one supplier. It's a new supplier, new talent pool, and a nice coupled integration that allows for very nice onboarding. We become the employer of record. We're doing all the payroll stuff. But an integrated solution where there's not really high markups because there's just one dominant agency. This is a hybrid pool of workers that allows for effectively really lower rates. Mm-hmm. And so that's the same thing that we work with Flentis with. Anytime there's a worker who's sourced in a non-traditional way, like offline through a direct sourcing platform, there's no supplier necessarily. It's not a traditional supplier. So where do you put them on payroll? They put them through us. We're nicely coupled, nice integration, so it allows for a complete visibility. And like Eric was talking about, the visibility is the most important thing. Understanding where your payments are going, understanding your entire business, who's performing, what suppliers, in this case us, who's performing well. And I think having that fully integrated solution, complete visibility, can drive the cost savings down because you can start understanding where you're spending money.
Yeah, absolutely. And I don't think, Francis, I don't think you mentioned your great accolade this year. Ascend won the Shark Tank Award at SIACWS this year, which is which is actually a tremendous honor. So I wanted to make sure that I plugged that for you, because a lot of companies vie for that, and there's only one, and you guys won it this year. So congrats on that.
Thank you.
You're
Absolutely.
welcome.
Congratulations. Perfect. So we're going to run through questions here really quickly. I'll just kind of throw them out there. Eric, Francis, whoever wants to answer it, go for it. And if there are questions that we don't have time to answer, we will follow up with you and get answers to you. And of course, if you think of anything after the fact, please feel free to reach out to any of us. So first question here, are there specific MSPs that have experience running vendor neutral programs in healthcare?
Yes, there are. There's a few. There's not a lot, but there are a few. And some are geared more towards a small mid-market. Some are geared more towards the larger market. There's even a couple that I know that are really take a very consultative approach to creating custom program management offices for clients, which I find really fascinating. So it's not just your typical brick and mortar MSP, but a custom built PMO that could be small. It could be built to stand it up and then hand it back to the client. It could be for the long term, but they're more nimble. I think they're more of a client advocate than some of the traditional brick and mortars. And it's also translates into cheaper administrative fees. So it gives your vendors a break as well, which we know the program fees in healthcare are somewhat substantial and really don't coalesce to the commercial program fees that we see in contingent workforce. So there's a lot of different ways to skin the cat in PMOs, but there aren't as many traditional I would say vendor neutral MSPs in this space as there are the commercial, but we're seeing more and more. And, I definitely have a nice list that I keep, with myself, based on the opportunity that we have. We introduce a few to the client.
Perfect. All right, next question here. The big issue is travel agencies have used predatory tactics during the pandemic to entice people away with big money. This has created an unfortunate challenge for many hospitals. Not necessarily a question, but is there anything that you guys want to speak to on that one?
Francis, I'll let you take that one.
I mean, yeah, the point is if you're stuck with like one supplier, that's your MSP, and you have nowhere else to look, I think, if the candidates leave for someone else that are enticed away, you're out of luck. I really think that. So I think it comes down to having a broad, diverse supply. You can cut down on some of these instances where it's this emergency where you need talent, getting ahead of it. Like we mentioned before, like getting that analytics, getting the broad supply of different types of suppliers, that allows you to get ahead of these predatory situations where you have nowhere else to go and you have to just pay up. So it gets rid of the bidding war if you can get it in front of it with visibility and centralization.
Yeah, agreed.
The next one here, is there a way to have a contingent talent pool seamlessly supplement an internal float pool?
Yes, great question, actually. That's a very forward-thinking question, as a matter of fact. A lot of clients have float pools managed under, some different technologies. I think, one thing we've done as an organization is, we have an actual talent pool that we allow for creation within the application and can communicate with multiple different applications, platforms, what have you. Even, for example, a healthcare system could have a position out for X amount of time within their internal float pool system. And if it's not filled, pops over into our application for fulfillment and, per diem fulfillment with whatever the list of vendors that they utilize on site. So, and then, if you've got direct sourcing solution, then you've already got these pre-vetted candidates that are sitting in certain areas. Some of them may be local, some of them may be travel, but they get instant visibility into those requisitions so that when they come out of the internal float pool system and pop into the contingent side, there's immediate response. And we've even had clients say, hey, can we put some of our staff that does float just into your application and just designate them as internal resources? And the answer is yes as well. So good question. But yes, there is a way to supplement that.
I'd love to add to that if possible. I mean, we see that in the market. We see that just like Eric mentioned about, a facility or a system saying, hey, let's put our folks onto Flentis because, why not? Why just have it? We can have it in one place. And we see this in the market and with other firms as well. A new technology firm like Flentis will go to a facility, to a hospital system and say, hey, why use this old float pool that's not working out for you? Put it all into our system. It'll work way better in a one unified place. And they'll do it, and they do it, and it works out great. And I think that's one way to, again, putting it into one place, like one platform, to have everything there allows you to realize these savings. So it's not like we have this internal float pool that sometimes works, and then sometimes we have to go to agencies. We're seeing this in the market. Newer firms are doing this. They're taking over some of the float pools to the new technology. And that, again, brings the centralization. And what we see, it brings the cost way, way, way down.
Awesome. Next one here. How do we get staffing agencies to bring down rates? $1 million question.
I don't know if there's a magic wand out there for that. It starts with rate intelligence and market intelligence. Again, I talked about the utilization of some of these intelligence tools that, you know, one of which we have a great relationship with. There's a couple of them out there in the market, but, you know, understanding the market is where you start, right? Understanding what your markups are is where you start as well. Implementation of a rate card potentially, or a not to exceed rate. Believe me, if one vendor says no, there's a litany of them that will come and say yes. You don't want to cut off your nose to spite your face either, because it is a very highly competitive marketplace based on supply chain strain. So you do have to be careful. But, you know, I mentioned a few things. I mentioned rate intelligence, supply intelligence. I mentioned rate cards. I mentioned tenure discounts, as well as volume-based discounts. Hey, you know, if I'm giving you $30 million in business, can you at least give us a rebate check of X back? Because, you know, we're giving you this tier 1 status and all this business. You know, that's one way you can do it. RFIs, you know, having a continuous RFI that comes out every year or 2 years. You know, you don't want to overburden your suppliers with those either, right? But again, when you have the data and the visibility into your market, into your business, into your vendor population, you'll know what the right sizing of not only your vendors is, but also what that sweet spot is in bill rate world, right? So it's an implementation of a number of different practices, to be honest.
Absolutely. Next question. I think we've got one more here. Yes. Does a VMS provide cost-saving benefits to a healthcare direct hiring company?
Francis, you want me to take that one since it's VMS?
Yeah, please.
The answer, bottom line, is yes, it does. You know, and I'm going to speak directly to Flentis on this, is, you know, we do facilitate direct hire and work with RPO companies that want to come in and support healthcare organizations. We have a couple of key suppliers in those spaces, but you know, we can actually partition the requisitioning process for direct hire and support it just like we do with contingent. And we actually have some cost savings strategies that I've seen utilized actually out of oil and gas that is really cool, where clients can get the support they need, right, but utilize many different methodologies of talent supply, and also provide some of their vendors that are really performing with the opportunity to see those requisitions on an ongoing basis, and maybe volume-based discounting. So I don't want to go too deep on that. I don't want to give all the nuggets away, but there's certainly ways to do that as well.
Perfect. And this is our last question here. If we did not get to you, we will reach out separately. But we're at the top of the hour. I want to get this one in really quickly. With staffing industry being dynamic, do you think a VMS/EOR could scale according to the market need?
Francis, I'll let you do that one.
Yeah. Well, I think we both should do this one on both VMS and EOR. I mean, I think it comes down to working with firms that are focused on technology. I think it's going to be newer firms that can really scale. You know, there are firms have been doing this kind of business for a while, but their technology is not able to meet the need of the candidates, not able to meet the need of just the amount of analytics that have to happen. The speed and integrations are just not there for some of the first generation products. It's the folks like Flentis, and I believe Ascend as well, that can allow like these programs to really scale. What we're built for EOR, we're built for scale. We're built for high volume. We don't make that much money like a staffing firm, for instance, on high markups for charging a lot per placement. For us, it's all about scale. So we focus tremendously, just like Flentis, on technology to make it so that even at very, very low margins, that we can make a lot of money. And that means scale. Technology that's built for scale, speed, candidate experience, visibility, integrations, overview, not minimizing the back and forth. If you're dealing with an SP and some legacy software, for instance, that's not new like Flentis, it's email driven. It's workarounds. It's everything that's going to slow things down. And so I think on placement number 1,000, you're really going to start to feel that. Maybe you won't in the beginning, but eventually that friction is going to be very, very dominant, and again drive up the cost and ultimately put you in an emergency situation.
Eric, anything to add there?
I think he crushed that one. So I'm just going to tip my cap and say, well said, sir.
Awesome. Well, that kind of wraps up everything for today. I want to thank Francis. Thank you for coming to the webinar and being our guest. We really appreciate you sharing your knowledge. And Eric, of course, thank you for always joining us here and sharing all the knowledge you have as well. So anyone, feel free to reach out to us with any additional questions. And that kind of concludes everything. Thank you for joining.
Have a great rest of your week, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you.